Welcome to this behind-the-scenes tour of Washington National Cathedral's Resurrection Chapel. Located on the crypt level, this chapel is one of three named and designed after events in the life of Jesus Christ. Combined, these chapels provide the foundation, physically and metaphorically, for the main nave above them. This intimate chapel, tucked away on the south crypt aisle, is different in style, use, and tone from any other cathedral space. Breaking from the cathedral's predominant Gothic style, this chapel is Norman or Romanesque, a style that flourished briefly prior to the Gothic, arriving in England from France with the Norman conquest in 1066. It is typified by thick walls, rounded arches, groined vaulting, and heavy columns. The characteristically restrained use of carved decoration includes intertwining Celtic designs and chevron motifs. It is a chapel of quiet simplicity and joy. The chapel is a memorial to Alfred Harding, 2nd Episcopal Bishop of Washington. For many years, the main feature of this chapel was the tomb of Bishop Harding, his wife, and son. The tomb, dedicated in 1929, was designed by William Douglas Corot, who also designed Bishop Satterley's tomb and the cathedral's Canterbury pulpit. It was carved from a single piece of limestone by Nathaniel Hitch. On top of the tomb is the figure of the bishop. He is shown asleep, holding a Bible open to the first verse of the Gospel of John. The bishop's dog, Kiddo, is carved at his feet. The dog is a symbol of fidelity carved on tombs since the Middle Ages. On the side of the tomb is carved Bishop Harding's Celtic pectoral cross, derived from the cathedral's Peace Cross. The lettering for the inscriptions was taken from the medieval Irish Book of Kells. Surrounding the tomb is a wrought iron grille fabricated by Samuel Yellin. In the Norman era, it was traditional for knights to thrust their spears into the ground around the body of their fallen leader. Yellin incorporated this motif in the spearheads that topped the grille. Yellin, in fact, designed all the wrought iron in this chapel. The torchère on the steps leading to the altar has unusual legs, uneven to accommodate the step. The ornamental hardware on the oak doors on the south side have wonderful details, and the handles on the double wooden doors into the center for prayer and pilgrimage bear the images of a man on one side and a woman on the other. The wooden lectern was designed in 1933 by the firm of Froman, Robb, and Little, cathedral architects. The top of the lectern swivels to allow the reader the use of both sides. Intricate patterns are carved into the base. A later addition to the chapel is the carved baptismal font, designed by cathedral architect Philip Froman and carved by Joseph Ratty, who was later baptized in it. Until the 1950s, the chapel remained largely undecorated, the walls and ceiling stained by leaks from the construction of the south transept directly above it. At that time, a movement began to complete the rest of the decoration of the chapel. Walls were replaced, and 1951 marked the installation of the mosaic above the altar, designed by Hildreth Meyer, depicting the risen Christ. Christ stands, robed in white, holding the cross and banner of victory. Golden rays of the rising sun radiate behind the figure in a sky of brilliant turquoise blue. To the right, 2 Roman soldiers are asleep at the tomb. To the left kneels an angel, modeled after Mrs. Meyer's daughter Louise. The mosaic was fabricated by the Ravenna Company of St. Louis, Missouri. The altar itself is bathstone, which has a very fine texture. A table or pedestal altar was felt to be more in keeping with Celtic design than a solid block. Each column has a different pattern. 4 Christian symbols are carved into the column capitals. Originally, the chapel walls and ceiling were to have been filled with frescoes. Later, Froman visualized that every surface not carved stone should be filled with mosaic, including the ceiling. He intended to make the chapel as glowing, sparkling, and gem-encrusted as the small Byzantine churches of Italy. In subsequent years, this plan was scaled down to a set of 6 wall mosaics portraying the appearances of Christ from Easter morning to Ascension Day. 5 of the mosaics were created by Rowan LeCompte and his first wife, Irene. The 6th, completed after her death, serves as her memorial. Each mosaic took approximately a year and a half to complete. From the earliest designs, the LeComptes decided to use traditional gold backgrounds. These mosaic pieces, gold leaf sandwiched between pieces of glass and then fired, come in 20 different shades. The first mosaic, with its pale gold background, depicts a morning scene, then moves through warmer and darker shades as the scenes move toward night. The first mosaic depicts Christ's appearance to Mary Magdalene on Easter morning. Clad in a glowing white robe, he stands in a garden blooming with new life. Behind him is the empty tomb. Mary greets him with joy and is told to go tell the disciples that Christ has risen. The second panel depicts Christ on the road to Emmaus with 2 people, one of whom is named Cleopas. In the LeCompte's interpretation, the second person is Cleopas's wife, Mary. The panel depicts the couple's invitation to the stranger they've been walking with to join them for supper. The couple then sits at a table containing 3 cups of wine and a plate of figs. As the stranger blesses the food, they recognize him as the Christ. The third mosaic continues the story of the previous panel. The disciples have retired to the upper room to mourn the loss of their master. Cleopas and his wife arrive from Emmaus with the news that they have seen Christ. At that moment, Christ himself appears in their midst. He asks for food and is offered a plate with fish and honeycomb. Christ's dark cloak, symbolizing death, is pierced by the radiance of his tunic, symbolizing his triumph over the grave. The fourth panel depicts Christ's confrontation with Thomas, who was not with the others in the upper room. Thomas expresses doubts about Christ's appearance and demands proof. Near the top of the mosaic, women bring food, and one of the disciples holds lilies, a symbol of eternal life. The fifth panel depicts Christ appearing to his disciples as they fish in the Sea of Tiberias. He is shown telling the disciples to cast their nets on the other side of the boat. As he speaks, they recognize him. The final panel depicts the last appearance of Christ before his ascension. In this panel, unlike others, he is set apart from the other figures, whom he instructs to go and make disciples of all nations. He is surrounded by apostles, each identified by his symbol: James, a scallop shell; Bartholomew, a knife; Simon, a saw; Peter, an inverted cross; Philip, a tau cross; Thomas, a builder's square; and Paul, his epistles. The other figures symbolize both the world, which is waiting for Christ's message, and the community of the faithful. They represent all humankind. These figures include portraits of the LeCompte's friends and family, as well as architect Frohman and the artists themselves. In the 1990s, a project to create kneelers for the chapel was instituted. Colors and symbols were derived from the chapel itself. Taking as the background color the yellow of the altar sunburst, the kneelers were designed to include traditional symbols of the resurrection. They include the peacock, whose flesh, legend says, never corrupts; the phoenix, a mythical bird that comes to life again from the flames of its own destruction; the lily, which blooms from a seemingly dead bulb; the butterfly, which breaks from the prison of its cocoon; the pomegranate, its seeds bursting as Christ burst from the tomb; a sunburst; and a crown with Alpha and Omega symbolizing Christ's kingship over death. The chapel is used most days for a brief service of intercessions. The rest of the day, it is available for private prayer and meditation. Votive candle racks permit lighting of candles in conjunction with prayer. The kneeler at one of the racks depicts the cathedral as a place of pilgrimage, with a rainbow leading pilgrims to the cathedral. On the south side of the chapel resides the Cathedral Center for Prayer and Pilgrimage. While not a part of the chapel, it's worth pointing out the center's location and program. It offers a place of quiet and hospitality to those seeking resources for spiritual life. An outer room holds books, pamphlets, and other resources. The inner rooms are dedicated to silent prayer and meditation. A volunteer is on duty when the center is open. In 1926, Dean Brattonall wrote, "The massiveness of the architectural features of the chapel will speak for the strength of the Church's belief in the resurrection. The colorful splendor of the walls will triumphantly typify Christ's victory over death." This statement summarizes the beauties awaiting those who discover Resurrection Chapel.